everybody, it's your girl Crystal coming out with a new video for y'all. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe and all of that jazz if you are new here. If you are not and you are returning, welcome back. I'm so happy that you are here again. So for today, we're doing true crime with Kim. Here we are about to talk about a victim, and the victim's name is Tina Marcotte. Now, originally, this murder case was unsolved, and over DNA evidence and all of that jazz and being able to have the technology that we have now, it is finally solved. So this one is definitely a doozy. Sometimes when I watch these, I'm like, how are they not? Because hello, I picked this one and here we are. So I'm gonna go ahead and start sorting myself out to get my makeup ready and all of that jazz. So I hope that you sit back, relax, get yourself some tea, some coffee, or something of that sort, or get yourself some lunch, dinner, whatever it is, a snack. And I've been really liking pickles with hot Cheetos, girl. Okay. But anyways, let's get started. I'm gonna be looking this way because one, this is where my mirror is. Two, this is where I have my information. So for starters, our victim was born on December 13th, 1963, and she was 30 years old at the time of her death. She was originally from Manchester, New Hampshire, and she eventually relocated to Rapid City, South Dakota with her boyfriend of 11 years. So she really loved this man. 11 years. She dated and ended up having 3 children with her boyfriend, and his name was Patrick Glessing. And again, I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, but I'm gonna put his name right here. Both of them worked at the Black Hill Molding, which is a wood processing plant, and her job was to be a lumber grader. Now, in order to be able to tell the story of Tina and just basically everything that happened to her, it is important that I do mention the main actors of this story. And by actors, I mean people that are involved in this case. So they played a huge significant role in the case and just kind of like everything that went down afterwards. So the first one would be, this man was her former co-worker and was also a former co-worker of Patrick as well. So they all used to work at Black Hills Molding together. So his name is Tom Couture, and he also lived in Rapid City. And the second important contributor or actor in the story is his wife, and her name is Nancy, and she shared 2 children with Tom. And lastly, I would say the most important, just kind of being able to piece all of this together at the end, is Vicky Riddle, who was Tina's best friend. Now, I will go over each of these actors that played a role in Tina's case, but first we have to understand how they basically were able to be intertwined together and how they all knew each other. So Tom's job occupation was a forklifter after he left Black Moldings, and he was a forklift driver for a place called Forest Productions Distribution, which was yet another wood processing plant. But this one was located at the outskirts of Rapid City. So Tom and Tina basically are linked together, and they're linked together just because of what happened literally less than a week after the disappearance of Tina at the time that this case was happening. And I say disappearance because at the time that the case was happening, it was a disappearance. And then eventually it wasn't, and it was considered a murder case. So this case starts on June 24th, 1994. On this day, Tina had pretty much finished her last shift, and this was on a Friday. Okay, so you know how it's Thursday, then it's 12 o'clock, and it's technically midnight, and then after midnight, it's now Friday in the morning. Okay, this is when this case was happening, which was Friday, June 24th, 1994. She finished her shift around 12:30 a.m., which was technically a really late shift because she was just getting off. So after she ended up getting off of her shift, she ended up calling Vicky, and she called Vicky because Tina was upset. Tina had stated that she noticed that the tire of her car was flat. So of course, I mean, who would not be upset that the tire of their car is flat, okay? So after this was going on, Vicky decided to offer Tina a ride back to Tina's home. But Vicky said, in order for me to do this, I do need to get ready, so please give me a few minutes to just grab my stuff and head out to the door to go pick you up. But prior to Vicky finishing getting ready, Tina noticed that a car pulled up, and she was like, hold up, somebody's over here. Mind you, it's 12:30, so like, why are you here? And also, she's a lumber grader, so like, who is picking up lumber almost like literally like 1 in the morning? Like, why would you be over there unless you work there or you know somebody's getting off? Okay, remember that. Okay, so Vicky waited a couple of minutes while Tina went to go talk to this individual that just pulled up, and Tina ended up telling Vicky that she did not need to come anymore. So this leads me to believe that Tina trusted whomever just pulled up. So of course you and I are both like, okay, but Kim, like, who pulled up? Who was it that pulled up? Tina said to Vicky, and I quote, "Tom's here and he's going to give me a ride home," end quote. Vicky then asked, well, who's Tom? Because I don't know who Tom is. And Tina then said, oh, Tom is just somebody who used to work with Pat and I. Okay, sure, if you trust him and he knows your boyfriend, then okay. So remember I told you that the Tom used to be her former coworker, so this pretty much implies that there would be nobody else other than just that Tom that I mentioned earlier that would have picked up Tina, because there was no other Tom working at the Black Hills Molding Wood Processing Center. So there's no other Tom basically. So Patrick, you know, is at home at this point, and he notices it's getting a little bit late, but he thought to himself that Tina would return soon, because again, he used to work there and he knew how long the shifts were, so he didn't think anything odd of this. So again, Patrick's not thinking that anything's weird about this. He's like, okay, well, you know, Tina's gonna show up anytime soon. And then literally as the day progresses, he wakes up and he notices that Tina's still not home. Mind you, it's still Friday in the morning. It's just no longer 12:30 a.m. And Patrick, the boyfriend of Tina, and Tom is Tina and Patrick's ex co-worker, decide to go to Vicky's house to go check if Tina is there. It wasn't until Tom showed up that Vicky decided to tell Tom, hey, Vicky told me that you were the one that last saw her. Tina told me that you were the one that picked her up because her tire was flat. So literally Tom heard this and he's like, what are you even talking about? I literally don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I didn't pick her up. Like, that's bogus. And literally Vicky was like, well, that's odd, because the only Tom that Tina knew was you. She said it's the Tom that used to work with her. So I'm confused as to why you're saying that it would be anybody else but yourself. And then Tom claimed that Tina was drunk and she wouldn't even know the difference between Tom and Ron, and pretty much just dismissed her and was like, yeah, that wasn't me. So she gets drunk, like, whatever. And she found this really odd. Like, Vicky found this really odd because she's like, okay, like, literally, again, like, that's the only Tom that is a former co-worker of Patrick and Tina. Vicky was then like, hey, well, you're the only Tom that used to work with her. So then Tom finally admitted, okay, yeah, I'm the only Tom that used to work with her. So Vicky noticed that like tension was rising, and she's like, okay, this is odd, like, why are you acting sus right now? And she noticed that he kept glaring at her and just basically not acting like himself. Which later on, when I heard like who Tom was and like the way that people characterized him, I was like, I don't really think that he was not acting like himself. He was acting like himself, because he was described as somebody who was just like moody and angry all the time, and like was not somebody with buen humor, which is like a good kind of like morale. Like, he was just always like, you know, just not the best to be with, a bad vibe basically. So then Patrick said that Tom suggested to go to police together. So they ended up going around 11 in the morning to the Rapid City Police Department headquarters. Now, I find this really odd, because it's like, okay, why are you saying that we should go, you know, to the police department if you were the last one to see her? Just based off the story that Vicky's telling Tom and Patrick, but probably to make himself look less suspicious or so. When the police went to go check on Tina's car, they noticed that her tire was slashed, and most likely from a knife, based on the puncture mark that was on her tire. Therefore, this case was no longer a missing persons case, but rather a possible murder, because there was obvious foul play. Tom was then asked to go see the police to come for an interview, which he voluntarily agreed to do. He's like, oh, you want to come talk to me? Then I'm okay with talking to. And then Tom was asked if he even gave a ride to Tina. And again, Tom did the same thing that he did with Vicky, where he denied ever giving her a ride by the area of her workplace. Tom literally was like, okay, if you don't believe me, then like, let's do a lie detector test. Like, let's just do a lie detector test, because that's going to prove that I am innocent, that I did not in fact give her a ride. So obviously the police is like, give me your little alibi. What were you doing Thursday night leading up to Friday in the morning? Because we had to pinpoint you to somewhere so you're not quote unquote in the murder scene. So then he literally says, on Thursday, June 23rd at 11 p.m., less than a couple of hours of Tina's shift ending, Tom was playing a softball game and gave his friend a ride home. He said that he drove his car, which was a bronze 1973 Pontiac LeMans sedan. I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly either. Listen, I didn't come here to pronounce car names correctly, okay? Which was broken down by the grocery store on East St. Patrick Street, and that he spent approximately 3 to 4 hours fixing his car engine and was underneath a street light. Now, if you like lived around here, I think you would notice if somebody is like out messing around with their car, especially because this is like Rapid City, so I wouldn't imagine the place would be super populated. Like, who's just out there that late just fixing their car, let alone like their car engine? My thing is, if you, as in Tom, if you just told Vicky, hey, I was not the one that gave a ride to Tina, then why are you rescinding back your word unless you had something to do with it? Which clearly it already is starting to look like Tom is the one that did something. Anyways, Tom never called his wife Nancy the night that he had been delayed, i.e. Thursday night leading up to Friday in the morning. Tom then told the police, I didn't come home till around 3 in the morning because his car was broken down. Nancy then said that Tom ended up coming home and that Tom immediately went to the washer machine and started washing his clothes, and even went as far as soaking his softball uniform. So I don't know about you, but this is screaming suspicious to me. I mean, honestly, like, who's doing laundry at 3 in the morning? I mean, you might be doing laundry at 3 in the morning, but not immediately after you come home, but to each their own, right? Anyways, Tom excuses this behavior. He says, the reason that I was doing that is because, like I said, I was fixing my vehicle and I was dealing with the engine. So, like, there was grease and there was oil from fixing all of that. So, of course, I want to get all the gunk out of my uniform and out of the clothes that I was wearing. So that's why I went to go wash my clothes. That was his excuse. Mind you, this happened on Friday. Also, he did something else. He also decided to wash his shoes and his shoelaces on Sunday. So the police pretty much felt like this is really suspicious. Why would somebody go out of their way to wash their shoes and to wash their shoelaces, including their uniform and the rest of the clothes that they wore the day of someone's murder? But Nancy came to Tom's defense and was like, I think that this is normal because Tom frequently does this. I mean, I don't know who frequently does something like that. Unless that was like his entire routine. Like, I get it, but I doubt it. I mean, honestly, like, who does their laundry at 3 in the morning? So let's go back to Tom's interrogation. So Tom decided to take the police where he quote unquote broke down. And he pointed to the exact spot that his car broke down. And the police then used this information to basically canvass around the neighborhood from that area and was knocking door to door and was like, hey, did you see a guy or did you see a vehicle at this time at this place? But guess what? They needed somebody to basically say, yes, this is really what Tom was doing at this place so it could confirm his alibi. But the police were not able to confirm his alibi. And it was to the point that 3 witnesses told the police that they've never seen Tom's vehicle whatsoever, nowhere near the vicinity that Tom was claiming that he was at. And again, I think you would remember because there would be noise and you'd be like, why is this guy out here at 1, 2, 3 in the morning fixing his car? So now here's another little actor slash player that comes in, which is Inspector Dean Guthmiller of the sheriff's department, that said that Tom's story wasn't adding up. And I mean, I think both you and I can say it ain't adding up, okay? So this led investigators to believe that Tom was involved in Tina's disappearance, at least to some sort of capacity, because again, his story wasn't adding up. The investigator believes that it's not adding up, so there has to be something. So eventually investigators start to do some more digging, and they tried to get a sense of who Tom is and start doing some character witness statements. And basically they found out that Tom had a darker side, and these were conclusions that were made by Tom's co-workers. They said that he was often moody and that he was mostly angry and that he didn't really get along with the other workers. So he had a little attitude problem is what I'm hearing. Mind you, he was 6 feet tall and weighed 185 pounds. So he was a big man, okay? So to others, he was pretty much considered physically intimidating. The police also learned something different too. And do you want to know what that was? They learned that Tom had a criminal record. Yes, ma'am, he had a criminal record. He had previously committed burglary and simple assault. And he also abused drugs and alcohol. So all of that does not sound like a good little mix to me. I mean, y'all tell me if that sounds like a good mix, but as far as I know, it don't sound like a good mix. Fast forward, and on Monday, 3 days after Tina's disappearance, the police decided to interview Tom at the lumber yard where he was working at. And the police interviewed Tom, and they pretty much told Tom, hey, you, sir, are someone who we suspect has some sort of dealings in Tina's disappearance. They pretty much asked Tom, hey, do you happen to have an affair, or were you having an affair with Tina by any chance? And Tom said, no, there's no way that we were having an affair. You know, I'm married, I have children, I have Nancy, you know, why would I get myself involved with another woman? And they were like, okay, duly noted. They also told Tom something else that was very interesting, and they told Tom, hey, by the way, I just want to let you know that we found blood in your vehicle and that it was going to be tested to check if it belonged to Tina. And the very next day, which this is like where things start turning, because now it sounds like, okay, it's just your average, you know, police are just doing their job and they're investigating, what have you. Tom was found dead. And at around 8:30 in the morning was when 2 workers at the place of employment of Tom and themselves found Tom's body at the plant yard. That's a turn, isn't it? And his head had been crushed beneath the rear wheel of his forklift. It was discovered that the forklift parking brake was not properly working, and it was argued from the police and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration that Tom's death was an accident. But some investigators argued there is no way that the forklift is what crushed Tom 100% and that it just happened just because it happened. The forklift would have rolled down way too slowly, and people argued that Tom was an excellent operator. There was no way that he would allow this forklift, or at least he would have moved out of the way from the forklift moving around without the brake. And it was important to also note that 2 weeks prior to this accident happening, that he had been to a class to learn more about forklift driving. So imagine, here's this guy who's 6 feet, 185 pounds. He has mood swings and everything. He's a person of emotion, and he's gonna let this forklift just let him run over. It doesn't sound like it's an accident. It sounds like somebody deliberately did this to him, and that is something that Nancy actually speculates is what happened. So of course, the police and the investigators tried to piece everything together to figure out, well, how in the world did this happen? If it's an accident, is it a suicide? Is it something more? Did somebody try to hurt Tom? And authorities believe that while Tom was working alone. He loaded roughly a ton of lumber into the forklift and then set it on an incline, jumped from the cab, and then perfectly positioned himself in the machine's path. Did you listen to what I just said? Tom willingly decided to put a bunch of lumber inside of his forklift and was like, meh, it's over. I'm just gonna try to myself. So investigator Guthmiller says that in his opinion, Tom took his own life because he was overwhelmed by the investigation into Tina's disappearance, and that Tom felt anxious that he was about to get caught for what he did. So he's like, nah, this was the way for Tom to get out of this. And Tom needed to frame what happened to him at his job as an accident to be able to have life insurance payouts to Nancy and his children. So investigators decided to reenact Tom's death, and they videotaped it and decided to put a 2x4 to stimulate Tom's body. And it showed that the forklift pretty much ran over the lumber, therefore the coroner ruled Tom's death as a suicide. This is now when Nancy starts to play a role. So since the beginning of this investigation and since the beginning of this ruling, she argued that Tom would have never left her nor his kids. And she believed that Tom would never ever think to harm anybody, let alone Tina. So Nancy decided to hire an attorney, and his name is Rich Bode, an investigator named John Kolbach, to investigate into Tom's death. And John stated that he did not believe that someone would choose this type of death, let alone would Tom ever decide to experiment with this idea, and that the experiment that they did showing Tom's body, the 2x4 showing Tom's body, was nowhere near being able to prove that the forklift would run over a body. This view was shared also by Rich, so the attorney. So it is important to note that Rich and John interviewed multiple people connected to this case and also hired a doctor, and that doctor's name was Al Farmer, which was a clinical psychologist. And Dr. Farmer said that he rejected the idea that Tom did this to himself because he lacked certain behaviors that would contribute to somebody with a suicide wish. Dr. Farmer concluded that there was no evidence to show that Tom felt guilty about Tina's disappearance or was even depressed enough or other factors that would have contributed to his death. Other co-workers claim that Tom was working like he typically did on the day of his death, and also there was no letter left behind by Tom on the day he died. So Nancy's kind of like, if he did this, why would he not leave a letter? Therefore, Nancy is convinced that someone attacked Tom in the lumberyard and then crushed him under the wheel of his own forklift, meaning that she believes that he was murdered and wished that the police would investigate his death more instead of just closing the case. She also claims that there was leads that were discovered, but the police were not going to follow it. Do we like it? Deciding not to do lashes, but I am gonna put on a lippy. So some of those leads, for example, was Bode interviewed one of Tom's co-workers, and that co-worker pretty much told Bode that another worker offered him $500 to break Tom's leg over a work dispute, and that the same co-worker tried to offer him money, was then bragging about hitting Tom and putting him under the forklift, but the police did not believe this man's story. I mean, I feel kind of like, why did you not believe his story? They could have like followed the lead, i.e. the police could have followed his lead. So investigator Guthmiller says that there was no drag marks to indicate that anybody had dragged Tom, and he notes that Tom pretty much almost weighed 200 pounds. So it would be very difficult for someone to actually end up carrying him. And there was no signs of struggle in the area. So as a result, investigator Guthmiller does not believe that it was a murder theory when it comes to Tom's case and the day that he passed away. But the police did believe that Tom murdered Tina, and they speculated on the night that she disappeared that he showed unexpectedly outside of her office, and that he intentionally slashed her tire to keep her from leaving. Investigator Guthmiller does not believe that Tom's appearance at the office at 12:30 a.m. was a coincidence, because think about it, Tom used to work where Tina used to work, so he would obviously know the shifts that they were working. So he thinks that this was planned. He believes that the only thing that failed in Tom's plan was the fact that Tina and Vicky had a phone call, and Tina told Vicky that somebody was there and that it was going to be Tom that was going to give her a ride back to her house. So according to the police theory, after Tina got into Tom's car, he made sexual advances to her, and when he was rejected, this then resulted in a murder. Nancy, however, says that the police have no evidence that link Tina's disappearance to Tom, and she also stated that there was nothing left in Tom's car that would link Tina being there, even in the first place. There's no DNA, no nothing. And she claims that the blood that was found in the vehicle was actually Kool-Aid, and there was no witnesses to place Tina in the car of Tom's car. She also believes that Vicky might have mistaken what Tina said in the phone call. So this was all speculated until finally there was a case that finally got closed. So this was unsolved, and now it is solved. So how did it get solved? At around noon on October 11th, 1995, workers at the Forest Products Distribution was using a piece of heavy equipment to move a pile of old scrap wood in the remote, rarely used part of the plant's yard. When a few pieces of the wood ended up falling off of the pile, he went to go pick them up. He then spotted a badly decomposed body in the pile of wood. Based on dental and medical records, alongside with clothing and other articles that were found nearby, it was identified as Tina's body. An autopsy determined that the cause of her death was that she was killed by blunt force trauma to the upper left side of her head. Police believe that she was killed the day of her disappearance. They also believe that she was killed elsewhere and then dumped there where the guy found her. Detectives continued to investigate Tina and Tom's case for several years, and both of them are now considered close. According to Tina's daughter Sherry, her DNA was matched on the blood that was in Tom's shoes. Investigators told Sherry that if Tom were still alive, they would charge him with Tina's murder because they were finally able to pinpoint some DNA evidence, Tom's shoe at the night that he said that he was in his car, it was broken down and what have you, and he was actually the murderer. But sadly, in 2015, Patrick, Tina's boyfriend, passed away. Tina's parents have also passed away, so they were never able to figure out who the real murderer was, but this case is officially closed. And it just makes me so sad that sometimes it's the people that we trust the most that end up hurting us the most. And that was the case in Tina's case, where she trusted Tom enough for Tom to actually drive her to her home, and then here comes Tom, who you would think, okay, he's my previous co-worker, he has a wife like Nancy, he has children, and then, you know, what is he gonna do? He got off of a softball game. I mean, this guy ended up taking his clothes from the softball game, ended up throwing them into the washer and everything, and he really went as far as trying to wash his shoes and his shoelaces, yet there was still blood. So it just makes me really upset that the family, Tina's family, never got the closure, but at least Tina's daughter did. So that is the end of today's case. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know if there's any cases that you guys would be interested in knowing more of. Do not forget to like, to comment, and subscribe, and all of the above. And that is it. Bye-bye.